Shout out to Caressa for sending me this article from BuzzFeed News. In case y'all don't know who this is, and you should, because he's been recently talked about with those other would-be kidnappers for the governor of Michigan. Some more information came out more specifically about him or pertaining to him. And in case y'all don't know his name is Barry Croft. And it just came out that he used Facebook to coordinate with other extremists to target other governors. I can't say I'm too surprised by this, considering Ralph Northam was on that list as well. And I told people in the video about Ralph Northam that I would not be surprised if there were more governors that they were targeting. Well, looks like I spoke it into existence, because apparently there were additional ones. Now, I don't know for which state these governors belong to, but we're hopefully about to find out. A leader of the group charged with conspiring to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer had also discussed plans to kidnap or harm politicians in North and South Carolina, which ironically are the two states below Virginia where Ralph Northam is the governor, who was also on that list, and had been under FBI surveillance for at least 6 months before the Michigan plot was foiled, newly unsealed affidavits reveal. Barry Croft, age 44, a Delaware resident and the only federal defendant in the Michigan plot to live outside of the state, used social media to attempt to organize acts of violence against politicians at least as early as fall of 2019. Now, that's interesting, because here we are under the impression that they were going after these individuals because of the whole lockdown and the quarantine and all of that stuff, because that's what they delivered the most on. But they said this goes back to fall 2019, before there was even a quarantine, before there was even a woo-woo, before any of that. So this guy it seems like he had this whole thing planned out even before then, and probably played on the emotions of others after the virus kicked off and what happened in April, and went with that. You know, you can rile people up based on emotions, which is what he did. But now, knowing this new information, he had ulterior motives outside of what the other ones probably did. At that time, he was in contact with Kevin Casey Massey, leader of a notorious anti-immigrant group in Texas, who was a fugitive at the time and appears to have committed suicide in December. The affidavits, which were filed October 22nd and unsealed this week, also revealed that although the FBI had monitored a succession of Facebook pages Croft used to communicate with other militant extremists around the country, the Bureau apparently failed to screenshot or otherwise preserve evidence from the account he used most recently before his October 7th arrest. Did they fail to do it, or they chose not to? The older accounts, however, were full of messages about violent plans. I'm going to North Carolina on Saturday to discuss going to war against the government of North Carolina, Croft wrote Massey in private messages on Facebook in October 2019. Please come out, bro. We need you. Facebook, which has been broadly criticized for its inability to effectively clamp down on extremists using its platform to recruit and organize, shut down that Facebook account on April 30th, according to the FBI document. But Croft simply opened at least 4 other accounts on the platform and used them to communicate with others who share his political views and to send messages calling for the death of a variety of political figures, including Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and y'all ready for this one? Because I didn't see this one coming. 45. That one right there caught me by surprise. Not so much the first two, but that third one did. I'm for hanging Democrats, Republicans, and Libertarians, Croft posted on June 24th. So this guy has no political leanings. He's basically anti-government. He's anti-establishment. I think just reading those names and reading what he just said in the quote, he doesn't care for the American government at all. A final Facebook page opened by Croft on September 2nd under the username Barry Croft was shut down on September 26th, according to the affidavit. But unlike his previous accounts, the FBI does not appear to have taken screenshots, which in part necessitated the search warrant application. The public information was not memorialized formally in any way, the document says, noting that observations about the Barry Croft account are based on the recollections of law enforcement officers. Facebook did not immediately respond to a request for comment on the matter, nor did representatives for the governors of North Carolina. A press secretary for South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster said that as a matter of practice, our office doesn't have comment on security issues like this one. A federal public defender in Delaware who represented Croft after his arrest did not respond to an email. Chris Cross LLC, a Delaware trucking firm identified in an affidavit as Croft's employer, could not be reached. Croft, a long-haul trucker, was arrested outside a convenience store in southern New Jersey on October 7th after FBI agents followed his truck for hours and is currently charged with kidnapping conspiracy. At the time, his truck was searched and agents seized 2 cell phones he had with him. In a separate search warrant application, the FBI is seeking to review material on those devices on grounds that they will contain messages, plans, photographs, and videos and other evidence of his participation in the conspiracy to kidnap Governor Whitmer. According to the Bureau of Prisons, Croft is currently being held in a federal detention center in Philadelphia and has not yet made an appearance in federal court in the Western District of Michigan, where he is charged. Croft is one of 6 defendants in the federal case. Meanwhile, the Michigan Attorney General has charged 8 other men for aiding the kidnapping scheme, which grew out of a meeting attended by militants from at least 4 states in Dublin, Ohio, near Columbus on June 6, among them Croft. According to a brief filed Wednesday by the Michigan Attorney General's office, the purpose of the event was to have a quote-unquote meeting of the minds with what could almost resemble a continental Congress of extremists calling for the overthrow of the government by violent means if necessary. And they want to put a so-called BIE on the watch list. And you have guys like this along with others who wants to overthrow the entire government and is talking about kidnapping governors and doing things to former presidents and sitting presidents and those who were first ladies of a president who ran for president. At that meeting, Croft met Adam Fox of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and they discussed plans for political violence in Lansing, the state capital, as well as possibly kidnapping Whitmer and the governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam. Just over a week after the Ohio meeting, Fox spoke on the phone with members of Michigan-based extremist group called the Wolverine Watchmen, saying he needed 200 men to storm the Capitol while it was in session, take hostages, hold public trials, execute quote-unquote tyrants, and broadcast the entire siege on television. It would take about 1 week and that no one is coming out alive, the Michigan Attorney General wrote in a separate brief. That plan was eventually abandoned after members of the Wolverine Watchmen argued it would be too difficult to pull off since the Capitol is a fishbowl and tactically difficult to hold. Instead, Croft, Fox, and other defendants developed a plan to kidnap Whitmer at her vacation house in rural Michigan and then either kill her on the spot, set her adrift on a boat in Lake Michigan, or transport her to Wisconsin for a trial they would conduct. The goal was to execute the plan before November 3rd elections, but both Croft and the Wolverine Watchmen had been under FBI surveillance for months before the critical June meeting, which also was attended by a confidential informant for the government. According to court filings by the FBI and the Michigan Attorney General, the Watchmen were brought to the attention of law enforcement in March after its members made plans to create a list of local police to target for killing, employing a hunting smartphone app called On X Hunt to determine the addresses of cops. FBI agents in Michigan interviewed a member of the Watchmen who was concerned about the group's plan to target and kill police officers and convinced that individual to work as a confidential informant, attending meetings and making clandestine recordings, according to the affidavit. On April 19th, meanwhile, FBI agents in Delaware obtained a search warrant to monitor Croft's Facebook page. After reading a private message in which Croft claimed that a total offensive would be taking place on April 25th, FBI agents surveilled him on that day, but did not observe anything unusual. Less than 2 weeks later, however, Croft used a different Facebook account to send private messages contemplating violent acts in South Carolina, where protests over the virus lockdowns were planned on May 8th. I'll be in Columbia, South Carolina on Friday, Croft wrote on May 3rd. They say only they want their governor in custody. Croft, who said he would bring a sword to the event, continued, I want to grab them all and hold trial. That same day, he posted on his public Facebook page an image that read, the Lock Up Your Governor Challenge. Which of the beautiful colonies is going to be the first to snatch a criminal bastard? The affidavit does not note whether Croft attended the rally, but by early July, Croft was meeting regularly with the Michigan conspirators and participating in highly organized training sessions. On July 11th, for example, he traveled to Wisconsin, where he attempted to build an improvised explosive device using black powder balloons, a fuse, and BBs for shrapnel, according to the federal criminal complaint. The device did not detonate. According to the affidavit, FBI agents used cell phone data to confirm his attendance at the event and the fact that he stayed nearby in Portage, Wisconsin. Croft was arrested multiple times in the 1990s on a variety of charges and pleaded guilty to burglary, conspiracy, and assault violations. He served nearly 3 years in prison from 1997 to 2000 on a firearms charge. Last year, he was pardoned by Delaware's governor following a recommendation from the State Board of Pardons. Well, that would probably explain why he didn't go after the governor of Delaware. He is not the only defendant in the case to have run-ins with the law enforcement. According to the filing from the Michigan Attorney General, the Wolverine Watchman was created in response to a weapons charge against its co-founder Joseph Morrison of Munith, Michigan. During a routine traffic stop, Morrison was arrested for carrying a concealed weapon on his hip, a charge that carries a sentence of up to 5 years in prison, but was reduced to a misdemeanor. Merely a few days after receiving a charge reduction and serving no additional jail time, Morrison started the Wolverine Watchman on Facebook, reads the filings, which seeks to prevent his release from detention before trial. A hearing on his detention is set for Monday. Last week, his father-in-law, Pete Musico, won a reduction in bond to $100,000 from $10 million in the same case. Well, it's good to see that it runs in the family. The Watchman, as described in the court papers, was a highly structured group and held mandatory training exercises where members practiced a variety of tactical skills, including taking a possible hostile vehicle over, planned ambushes, and responding to ambush and flank. Members of the private Facebook page who did not attend such events in person were purged from the group, which described itself as a group of patriots to network and assemble and recruit like-minded individuals. The Watchmen showed affinity for the Boogaloo extremist movement, which calls for a civil war. Describing themselves as Mujahideen, I'm not sure if I even pronounced that correct. They attended a Second Amendment rallies in the Michigan State Capitol dressed in the Hawaiian shirts favored by Boogaloos. Morrison, elected commander of the group, was referred to as Boogaloo Bunyan, and on Facebook they explicitly excluded feds status, cops, bootlickers, or commies, or ethno-nationalists. Fox, whom the FBI has identified along with Croft as the other leader of the kidnapping conspiracy, was not a member of the Watchmen, but according to an affidavit in the state case, he was the leader of a group called Michigan 3. Well, I don't know how this is supposed to read because they have it with different symbols and everything like that. Never mind. I get it. Michigan 3 percenters. I wasn't sure how they wrote it. The far-right 3%er movement advocates heavily for gun rights and is categorized by the Southern Poverty Law Center as an anti-government group. They didn't have to tell me that after reading all that. We've already established that about 10 minutes ago. According to the latest court filings, Morrison, Musico, and Fox in late June also considered the possibility of recruiting another extremist group, the Michigan Militia of Love, to assist with their original plot to assault the state capitol. It is not clear whether any members of that group ever actively participated in the plot. I know that was a bit of a lengthy article. I wasn't even expecting it to be that long. I thought it was going to just kind of cut off after they got with his part. But then I like that they did a little backstory on this guy, not only with his dealings with the group, but also a backstory on his record going back to the 90s. So, a tiger doesn't change his stripes, apparently, in his case, or any case for that matter. But this guy definitely, after reading all of that, like I established before, he is definitely anti-government. He is anti-establishment. Like I said, the only thing that surprised me on that thing was when he said that he wanted to do the hangings of 45. It didn't surprise me with the first two because we've heard those plenty of times. So he just basically doesn't care about who's president or anything like that. Because in his eyes, they're all bad. They mean no good whatsoever. It's just that he was willing to act on his own impulses. But of course, when you start putting stuff like that out there on the internet, that's when the surveillance begins. So he had to have known he was being watched, especially since he already had a record that dated back to the 90s. He just happened to get pardoned last year, and ironically he got pardoned, and that's when he goes full throttle with this. So in that aspect, he's kind of smart, because that means they kind of expunge his record in so many ways. But it's not like they forgot what he went to jail for. But yeah, expect more of this. But I called it. I told you, I said, if they went after Ralph Northam, I'm willing to bet there were more governors they were going after. And sure enough, they said that they were going after people in North Carolina and South Carolina. But I won't be surprised if it's some more out there that they were going after as well. But the only thing that also got me was the fact that he was planning this since fall of last year, before this virus was even a thing. Or maybe, slowly going into fruition as a thing, but it didn't have a title behind it. It's not like how it is now. So he definitely had ulterior motives prior to this, but with what happened with the virus and the lockdown and the quarantine and everything like that, he basically took that part and ran with it. And so he could have an even more bigger motive behind what he was doing. But y'all let me know what y'all think about this down in the comments.